Hello, my name is Judith, and I'm an alcoholic. Such a pleasure to be here tonight. It's always a pleasure to be at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous when I'm traveling, and I want to thank Duffy for inviting me to join you and participate in your meeting here tonight. She said it was a meeting. This is like twice as big as our state convention where I'm from. I was expecting a meeting. But I want to thank you all for having me here. And I live in North Dakota. And you're all welcome. We have a conference in January if you'd like to stop by. You're more, I don't know why people laugh at that. We have nothing else to do in January. So we put on a great conference. You're all welcome. I have a home group, and it's called the Three Legacies Home Group. We take 24 weeks to go through the steps, 12 weeks to go through the traditions, and 12 weeks to go through the concepts, and it's amazing. And we have a great group there of enthusiastic young people, younger than me, and it's just amazing to see the enthusiasm and hunger that they have for this program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a sponsor. And I today love working with women that I sponsor as well. And it is the bright spot of my life in Alcoholics Anonymous to work with others. Wasn't always that way by any means. I was raised in Australia. G'day, mate. My father's Australian and my mother's American, so I just say I'm half and half. And I'm baffled. You know, I've heard in Alcoholics Anonymous so many times that people describe themselves as they were someone with a lot of potential. All right, that's not my story. I had no potential whatsoever. And I can prove it because over in Australia, when I was in 8th grade, a few years back, my mom, you know how moms collect your stuff and put it in a box. And a few years ago, she gave me a box of my stuff back. And in that box was my report card from the 8th grade. And over there, the teacher fills out your grades and whatnot, and then they send it home, and your parents are supposed to answer a few questions and then send it back, sort of like cooperation, you know, with the home. One of those questions was, what potential does your child show? And I swear, my mom wrote, Judith has yet to show any potential at this point in time. But we pray every day. I am not, God honest truth. So I was off to a great start. I didn't know if I was here or down under or what was going on. But I moved over to, I came to visit my mom's side of the family. My mom was born and raised in North Dakota. I came to just visit. But growing up, the one American show that we had over there was Little House on the Prairie. And I wanted to be Laura. I thought, it was great. So I ended up in North Dakota to visit my mom's side of the family, met a farm boy, and with all the wisdom of an 18-year-old, within a month I was engaged and married a few months later. And that was sober, But so I was living in a very little house on the prairie. I moved from a city of 3.5 million to a city or town of 350 people. And then winter hit. And I had no idea what I was in for. But anyway, I was raised in a very, very, very strict family, very religious family. My parents to this day have never had a drop of alcohol. When I was, I forgot my sobriety date. I was going to say when I was 3 months sober. But my sobriety date is January the 19th, 2009, when that is the most important date in my life. So I'm sorry I missed that. But when I was about 3 months sober, I went and talked to my mom, and I was like, Mom, I'm 3 months sober. And she said, yay, I'm 80 years sober. They're not impressed by me whatsoever. But I did not have a drop of alcohol until I was 28 years old. And that's a little bit unusual from the women I work with. It's usually 11, 12, 13. But I didn't have a drop till I was 28 years old. And the only reason I mention that is when I did, I drank from 28 to 44 when I got sober. And I didn't stop. It was like I figured I had to make up for lost time or something. But when I did have that drink, that first drink, I remember it like it was yesterday. Now, I love Starbucks, and I do not remember the first time I ever had a Starbucks. I don't, but I'm 54 now, and I remember that first drink at 28 as though it was yesterday. It fundamentally changed my life. It was like the combination codes. You know, if you're doing a combination at school and you turn it that way and you hear click, you turn it that way, click that way, and then it opens up. That's how it was for me. It was like the tumblers of my life just went click, 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 and a whole new world opened up. It was like the genie came out of the bottle. Little did I know that I was going to climb into that bottle from 28 to 44, and my whole life was going to be the circumference of that bottle. I had no idea. I had not been raised around alcohol. I had never met, to my knowledge, an alcoholic. I had no idea what this was. You know, in the big book, it talks about that there's an invisible line that we cross somewhere. I know where mine is. It was right here. As soon as that crossed that line, as soon as I had a drink, my life fundamentally changed. Within a year, I was divorced from that farm boy for no reason. I was divorced. I was excommunicated from the church. And if you don't know, what that means is people are sitting around like you are, and they vote. Should we kick her out? Yes or no? And the vote was yes. So right there, and at 28, I turned my back on family, friends, community, faith, anything, and my higher power became alcohol. My God, it was everything to me. And if you got between me and alcohol, it was you that lost every time. Every time. So I was off to the races right away, and sure there were missteps, you know. Sure there was times where I overshot the mark, but I used the excuse of, I'm just learning, okay? You all did this when you were in high school. You all did this when you were in college. I'm not doing anything different from what you all did, so get off my back. You know, I walked away from everything, and so I was 28 when I had the first drink. I could have used it when I was 8, but because everything fell into place. I could, you know, I'm sure you've heard it described, could take that great exhale, and everything was okay. The voices in my head that were constantly chattering quieted down. Everything was okay, and I didn't care about anything. So I am the type of drinker that I black out. I forget that I got married a second time in my drinking. I forget that I'm married. I don't come home. I forget commitments. I forget who I am. I forget what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't just lower my morals. I have no morals. And that's how I live my life. I got an education. I ended up making it through law school, which should concern you because I don't remember law school very much. And I got a job, and I started working the entire time drinking. After I graduated from law school, I was introduced by other attorneys and politicians. Drugs, cocaine, was a big part of the world that I was in, which just meant I could drink faster and longer. And So I was living this double life. By day, I'm working as legal counsel for the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And by night, I'm partying, and on the weekends, I have such a high-profile job that I have to get out of town. And at this time, I've done several geographics, bouncing around. But at this point in time, I am based in South Dakota, not North, where I live now. South, think Rushmore, Mount Rushmore, the faces. That's where I'm living, okay, at this time. And so I have to get out of town on the weekends to be able to drink and party and do what I need to do, because I cannot have anyone see me do anything. So what I would do is, in South Dakota, we have 9 Indian reservations, and I would go to Pine Ridge or Rosebud Indian Reservation to party and drink the way I needed to on the weekends. That's what I did, weekend after weekend. The last 4.5 years of my drinking, I would have to say that I cannot remember a day going by that I did not have alcohol in my system every day. It was how I lived. I had pushed everyone away from me. My mom would have to call my parents were living in Australia. They would have to call the police department and have them come find me. Is she still alive? What is she doing? I'd find little notes on my apartment door. Judith, call your mother. Police department, that's how it was. So I basically, it was me and alcohol. And that's what it came down to. There were a few other things, relationships come and go. But the other things that were always a constant in my life was striving for something of meaning. I had this high-profile job, so I was always seeking for prestige. I was always seeking for more power, and I was certainly always seeking for more possessions. Because what else is there beside those three? And so I'm on this striving to, if only I had that. I think my life motto was, I'll be happy when. And you can fill in the blank. I'll be happy when I get that job. I get the job. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I'll be happy when this busy time is over. I'll be happy when the holidays come. I'll be happy when the holidays are over. I'll be happy when I get him. I'll be happy when I get rid of him. I'll be happy when. And the thing is that many of those wins, many of those things did happen. And I was very fortunate. I got a lot of things that I strived for. But it was, maybe it would be okay for a couple weeks, or maybe a couple months, a new car, or whatever it may be, and the shine would wear off. And then it's on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And that's how I lived. I was always searching. My last run was Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, and I had to get out of town again, and I went up to Deadwood, an old gambling mining town that stays open all night, and once again I came to somewhere I didn't want to be, in a situation I didn't want to be in. And that day for some reason, I just had this overwhelming panic, and I had to get out of there. I grabbed my stuff, went down, jumped into my nice shiny convertible sports car, peeled out of the garage and parking lot, and promptly ran into another vehicle. Now I'm in trouble, because I'm the legal counsel for the Chief Justice, and I have illegal substances in my bloodstream, and I am well over the legal limit to be driving. So what do? Like any good, selfish, self-centered alcoholic, I fled the scene of the crime. And I'm coming down off the mountain, and down Deadwoods on the mountain. I'm coming down off the mountain into Rapid City, and I have a moment of clarity. I didn't know that's what it was called, but I had this moment of clarity. I have a friend who describes it as that moment when the liar in you is silenced just long enough for you to see the truth. And just for a moment, the liar in me was silenced. And all I could think was, who are you? Who are you? I was raised in a very good family. My parents are still together. I forgot to mention, my father has a doctorate in theology. I've been raised from infant up, knowing right and wrong, knowing how I should be living. And my life bared no resemblance to anything I had ever known, nothing I had ever been exposed to. And it became the only normal life, like it says in the big book. It's this life that I was living, this lying and cheating and illegal activities and being irresponsible and showing up in court intoxicated and not caring about anything. And I could not connect with another human being. I could not feel love. And I certainly couldn't give love. The inside of me just felt like it was absolutely decaying. It's like I had leprosy of the soul. And by this time, no amount of alcohol was fixing anything anymore. I was still drinking daily. But nothing was getting better anymore. And I was just hanging on. And for a moment, it was like, who are you? How did this happen? But quickly, that closed up. And I continued on. I got to down the mountain to Rapid, and I had called a friend of mine someone I drank with and someone that was just like me. And I hadn't seen him for a couple months. I didn't know where he had disappeared to. But I was going through town. I was shook up because I had this accident. And I said, hey, do you want to get together for a drink? I'm passing through town on my way home after this long weekend. Do you want to meet me? And he said yes. And it was 10:30 on a Sunday morning, and I said, okay, meet me at such and such a bar. And he met me. And what I only found out years later was, and he explained to me where he was for the last 2 months. He was with you guys, and he had been sober for 2 months. But years later, just a few years later, I talked to him about that morning, and he said he was sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that morning. And his phone vibrated, and he looked down and he saw my name. And he said, I didn't know what you wanted, but I knew what you needed. So he got up, he left the meeting, he stepped outside, and he took that call, and it was me. And I wasn't asking for help. I was asking him to have a drink. And at 2 months sober, he showed up, sat across from me in a bar while I drank, and he had told me what he had been doing for the last 2 months, and he had been with you guys, and you guys prepared him for that call. He was well armed. He didn't lecture me. He used to lecture me when I was drunk, and I'd lecture him. You really ought to stop drinking. What's your problem? But then that day, he didn't talk to me about my drinking at all. He told me what he had been doing for 2 months with you all. And quite frankly, I don't remember a word he said that day. I really don't. But what I do remember is his physical appearance had been so transformed in 2 months that I just stood there and looked at him. He had this peace and this joy that just beamed out of his eyes, and he's smiling, and he was okay. And he was talking about these things, and I could not deny the evidence that was sitting across the table from me. And that's because of you guys. So I continued. I drank my drinks. It was 2 for $1, and I'm drinking. And But it wasn't really drinking, it was Bloody Marys, and that was breakfast. Had I known those were going to be my last drink, I would have done something else. But I was drinking all this, Bloody Marys, and so then I got back on the road and I drove another 2 hours home. And I had a decision to make because I had Monday off. It was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And that battle that I didn't even understand, called the obsession of the mind, started kicking in. AA meeting, liquor store. AA, liquor store. And to this day, I just get chills. I have no idea. I really honestly have no idea how my car made it to AA that night. I have no idea. But it did. And that was on the 18th of January. I don't count that as my sobriety date because I had chemicals and alcohol in my system. And that night, you guys welcomed me, even though I smelled like alcohol, even though it was clear that I was intoxicated. You welcomed me. You gave me a coin that said 24 hours on it, and I didn't know, was I supposed to tell you I hadn't gotten 24 hours or not? I didn't know what I was supposed to do with it. And you also gave me a big book. My first big book was stolen from that club. And they said, this old guy who looked exactly like an alcoholic, I knew this is an alcoholic because he was old, he had bib overalls on, no teeth, and he was just like, gruff, and I was like, he's an alcoholic. Because I had no idea. I don't look like an alcoholic. I haven't been to jail. It can't be me. My problem is life. My problem is him. My problem is my boss, the job, whatever. I can't stand life, but I'm not the problem, and alcohol certainly isn't the problem. And my first meeting, and for the next several weeks in that meeting, I would not identify as an alcoholic. I would say, my name's Judith, and I would glare at the person next to me like, what? You got a problem? But you kept telling me to come back, so I did. But I would not say I was an alcoholic because somewhere, somehow, without you even telling me, I knew that if I would admit to myself that I was an alcoholic, something else would fundamentally change in my life. For some reason, without being told, I knew I no longer had choices. I like to pretend I had choices, but I didn't have choices. Somewhere deep down inside of me, I knew I had two alternatives because I sat there for 2 weeks listening to you guys explain what was wrong with me. And I was starting to get the sneaking suspicion that I may be like you, I couldn't deny it. I tried to focus on the external, if you're here and you're new and you're like, she didn't start drinking until she was 28. What does she know about my life? Or she's educated. She had this, she had that. What does she know? I tried to do that too. I tried to pick out the externals and disidentify. Well, I'm not like him. I'm not like her. They're stupid. They're whatever it is, right? But I listened and I heard what you were talking about and how you felt when you were drinking. And I definitely heard how you were feeling when you were not drinking. And finally, I realized that I only had two alternatives. And one was to do what you're doing or to go back and start drinking with full knowledge that I was going to drink to the bitter end of an alcoholic death or the gates of insanity. Those were my two alternatives. I no longer had choices. And so around about 2 weeks of attending meetings every night at 8 p.m. in this little town that had 15 people in the whole meeting, I said the most important words I've ever said in my entire life, and that was, my name's Judith and I'm an alcoholic. And from that moment, my life has taken an entirely new direction. Now, I'd like to say that at that moment, I did everything right, everything what you told me to do, and life was butterflies and unicorns, but that is not the case. I had been kicked out of the club, church. I'd been kicked out. I'd been excommunicated. I despised any mention of God, any mention of spirituality. And you're not fooling me with this higher power thing, right? I have been memorizing The other good book, since I was little, I have had to memorize chapters. I know more than all of you. This is my thinking. And you know what? It doesn't work. And one day you're all going to wise up and find out it doesn't work as well. And I will not bend the knee to anyone. I cannot do your steps because it talks about spiritual principles. I cannot do it because it talks about praying. I cannot get a sponsor because they're going to tell me to do the steps. So what I did was I sat with you guys every single night. I did not miss a night. And I said to myself, I'm going to try this for 6 months. And I'm going to put as much effort into this as I did into my drinking. And if at the end of 6 months it doesn't work, well, fine. I'll go and I'll drink myself to death. I'm an attorney. I make decisions based on, okay, we got to research this a little bit, all right? Give it a chance, and then I'm going to make a verdict. Is it working? Is it not? So this is what I'm doing, and I'm sitting with you every single night. I didn't miss a night, 8 p.m. And I sit there, and 6 months comes along, and my life is better. Well, no, it wasn't, actually. I was sober. And I actually was worse than ever. You know, when they say irritable, restless, and discontent, that is an understatement as far as I'm concerned. Around 6 months, it's like, you know what? Is this the rest of my life? Is this really what it's going to be? This sobriety thing really isn't all that it cracked up to be. Although I always felt better for that 1 hour that I was with you. For some reason, I always felt better when I left. But the rest of my life was in shambles. At around 6 months, I decided it must be my job. Maybe that's it. So I left that wonderful job that I loved and I was good at, and I took a different job, and it was with the U.S. Attorney. Okay? Those of you who are not familiar with the court system, you have the state and you have the federal. You don't want to get in trouble on the federal side of things. And the U.S. Attorney's Office is those people who prosecute anything that has to do with federal law. Without a wisdom of thinking this through, without a program, without a sponsor, I decided, more power, more prestige, more paycheck, that means more possessions. Maybe this is what's missing from my life. So I take the job, get sworn in as an assistant U.S. attorney. I forgot to really focus on the job description, which was prosecuting violent and drug crime on the reservations. You guys were paying attention. The reservations where I used to go and do all those illegal things. But they had a lot of training at first. And I can tell you, I did have a program of recovery, sobriety, whatever you want to call it. I would sit at my desk. I had windows, beautiful gardens there, and it was very, very nice. And my program of recovery or sobriety was I would sit and I had clenched fists and I would rock. And I would watch that clock, and every 15 minutes and half an hour, and I would rock and I would just don't drink. Just don't drink. Just don't drink. I would look out on the gardens, and they would bring the women, inmates over from the women's prison, and they would be dressed in orange, and they would care for all the beautiful gardens and the roses and everything else. And I would look out my window wearing my thousands of dollars suits with my sports car in the parking lot with all this power, possessions, and prestige I could ever want. And I'm looking out at these women inmates, and I'm envying them. I can remember as clear as day thinking they're more free than I am. At least their fight is over. I didn't understand you can get stuff in prison. But other than that, at that point in time, I thought that their fight was over. And I have to sit there and clench and rock and say, just don't drink. Just don't drink. I could barely breathe. I didn't understand the obsession of the mind that I was fighting. I didn't understand that I didn't have the power to do anything about being an alcoholic. My life was absolutely unraveling around me. I ended up at 11 and a half months dry, sitting in the middle of you guys, going to a meeting every day, but refusing to do a step, refusing to get a sponsor. And at 11 and a half months, I had a loaded pistol and I was ready to use it. I was planning to kill myself. Sober, attending Alcoholics Anonymous, but refusing to do your program. I didn't understand that the program was contained in the book, that it's a design for living that would help me. Because I thought that coming and sitting with you was being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, at 11 and a half months, apparently that power that I despised, I had this rage at, decided to intervene. And I had finished with all my training and FBI school and all this great stuff, and I had my first case, and the first case that came across my desk, I happened to know very well. And I had to disclose that I knew this person, but I didn't say why. I just, you can't prosecute someone you knew. They were very excited about it. They thought that they had just caught the biggest drug dealer on the reservation. They hadn't, but they didn't know that. They were very excited. And I had to say, I can't prosecute him. I know him, and all hell broke loose. And the U.S. attorney flew in on his jet, and 2 assistant U.S. attorneys, which was what I was, they came in. 3 FBI agents came in, and yes, it's just like on TV. 6 guys in suits yelling, good cop, bad cops, spit flying in my face. How do you know him? Why do you know him? Where is this? Back and forth. And I was just saying anything. I don't have a program, an honest program. There wasn't an honest bone in my body, even though I'd been with you for 11 and a half months, and I'm just saying anything. I'm like, well, we're all related on the reservation. I'm not even Native American, but I'm just saying anything I can, I get out of there, and they said, well, you haven't heard the last from us. They're going to go and talk to Dee, and they're going to discuss it with him. And I know my life is over because I'm heading to federal prison because he can make a deal with them, and he's going to get out. And I'm going to prison. And at that time, I went into the parking lot, and I was just destroyed. And the first thought... Well, I've heard people in AA say that my best thinking got me to AA. That's not my experience either. My best thinking gets me drunk and dead. Because my first thought was, fine, it's over. I'll go to the reservation, do what I need to do to get what I need to get, and then I'll take my life or die slowly, either way, but I'm done with this sobriety thing. Then a thought from outside of me, from a God I didn't believe in, put another thought out there. And that thought was, they have good AA in Rapid City. And I said, fine, I'll go to Rapid City. But if that doesn't work, I'm done. That very day I packed up and took off, and I went to Rapid City. Had to get out of town a little fast. Like they wouldn't be able to find me, but it's what I did. And you guys embraced me. I walked in, and you saw that I was dying of untreated alcoholism, even though I had 11 and a half months of sitting with you. And you gave me a sponsor. I didn't pick. And my sponsor took me through those steps. And my sponsor was one of the kind that said, I don't care how you feel. I don't care what you think. You're going to do it anyway. Do it or die. And went through these steps. And, we talk about the 4th and the 5th being hard and the 8th and the 9th being hard. And yes, they were a little difficult for me. But my biggest one was step 3. Having to come to grips with a power that's greater than me. Finally becoming willing to bend the knee. Trusting somebody. The great thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is that I did it, and I did it for 4 years, just listening to your design for living and just doing what I was supposed to do. And it was like, I'll do the best I can, but I'm not bending that knee, not totally, not fully. I'll say your prayers. And it wasn't until I was 4 years sober that finally it was this wonderful member of Alcoholics Anonymous that was sharing their prayer with me, their third step prayer with me. And it was, God surprised me today. Lead me where you need me. God surprised me today. And I realized that I still was terrified of this higher power. I still didn't trust this higher power. And my sobriety was less than satisfactory, even though my life was wonderfully transformed inside, and I had the peace, and things were going well. But I heard that God surprised me today, lead me where you need me. And at that point in life, at 4 years sobriety, I did another secondary spiritual surrender, for lack of a better word, and my life has never been the same. I have decided that that's my only primary purpose, is to serve this God I once despised and raged against. I can't explain God. I can't define God. I don't even know if that's the right word to use. But my life is committed to giving back. D, the guy, his name's Dean, that was my first case. He never, ever gave me up. I got to see him. He got out of prison. He's clean and sober. And I asked him, I said, why didn't you say anything? And he said, because you were always nice to me. And the thing of it is I never was nice to him. He had what I wanted. But he never, ever gave me up. Someone went to prison for me. And at 4 years sober, I said, fine, I'll bend that knee and commit the rest of my life to serving others. You guys taught me that. My primary purpose is to serve God and God's kids. I no longer have the power. I no longer have the prestige. I definitely don't have any of the possessions. I don't do law. My primary purpose is to serve God and God's kids. It no longer matters that I have no potential. All I have to do is do what you guys have taught me and follow the design of living that is outlined in that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and potential doesn't matter. My life takes on more meaning and more fulfillment than I could ever want. I don't have any of those external things, but I have something that is worth far, far more, and that is absolute peace in my head and in my heart. And I want to thank you for giving me that design for living. Thank you for my life.